Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Quigley on Divorce, a behind-the-scenes look. I'm your host, James Quigley, and joined by my partner, who you've seen in a number of episodes before, Jordan Rosenberg. Jordan, thanks for joining.
Thanks to be here.
So it's been maybe not quite a year, but probably close to a year since we have done a podcast. As many of you know, probably started a good 2 or 3 years ago with the podcast, and when I first started the podcast, it was very few in the area of family law and divorce. Now you see quite a few of them, different platforms, some kind of comical and so forth. We've always tried to give you, the viewers and listeners, a little bit more of what we've always called a behind-the-scenes look. What's really going on? What do you maybe not see on the internet? What don't you see in the statute book? I have been the president of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, the Illinois chapter, for the last year, and my tenure is coming to an end. So my commitment and obligation to the organization, which is a national organization, has been robust, to say the least, so it's impacted my time. But we are, as the year 2022 comes to a close, we're going to have more time and we're going to bring it back. So lots to talk about. So Jordan, the thing we discussed is, after this hiatus of sorts, finding us heading into the fourth quarter here of 2022, we wanted to really talk about the state of the union. Where are we at in the world of divorce, particularly here in Illinois, compared to a year ago? We're still on the heels of the pandemic. Is it over? Is it not? Some people are wearing masks, some are not. Some people are in person in court, some are not. So with that said, Jordan, why don't you kind of start by giving the viewers and listeners just somewhat of an overview as to kind of your observations, what's happening in this last year. We can talk about trends later, but where are we at as we sit here going into the last quarter of 22?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question with a big answer. But really, I mean, a lot has changed since our last podcast. And I know we talked about this a little bit, and we had the hybrid proceedings with Zoom court, and how personalities change when you're on a computer screen rather than when you're in person. So basically what's happened is we've become accustomed to a Zoom mentality a little bit. However, the cons have really flushed themselves out, I think. Yeah. And so, again, right now in courts, most statuses or uncontested issues are still on Zoom. And so you kind of log on, you're the name on the screen with the box, the judge is there, sometimes there's a court reporter, and that is by and large how the uncontested, relatively routine status calls go. Now, more contested issues, we've really moved in pretty much all counties at this point to a more in-person setting for really contested issues. So for example, James and I, we just had a trial together that was in person for 2 days, and we did the old school, wheel in the boxes, put your witness on the stand, and that felt really good. And I think that, and what I think you would notice, James, what you probably would say too, is it's just different. When you have a witness, when you have a person, when you have a judge who's sitting atop, and presiding over you, that's a different, cool feeling where everybody's just more invested. Everybody's paying more attention, and I think information is communicated a little bit better. But that's sort of where we're at, is the more contested issues. Some, I would say a lot, for a vast majority are now in person, depending on your judge and the local rules, and the uncontested stuff is more on Zoom. But what I had a question for you, James, is of the Zoom era, what would you say right now is its biggest deficiency and its biggest pro?
Well, if you got me started on the biggest deficiencies, we'd exhaust the entire podcast on that issue. I'm not a fan, never have been. I know when it started, you actually very early on said, I love Zoom. I'm like, what are you talking about? You said, it's the great equalizer. Right. Everybody's just a box on a TV screen. My 30 years trying cases, being in someone's face, being in front of a judge, doing what we do as trial lawyers was sort of eviscerated. And so I've never enjoyed it. Is it a little bit easier not to have to drive to the courthouse or walk across the street, in our case from the office here. Sure. What I think the biggest drawback of Zoom, and really, this is I try not to be political, but really, when I get into the kind of commentary of what's happened, what I see is I'm an in-person person, right? I like to sit here with you, fist pump, we throw the football in the office, whatever, there's a human interaction. And like you talked about our trial. In that trial, there was the temperature went up. There was some.
It got dicey.
Got dicey. There were some heated moments. That's what trial is.
Right.
It's an adversarial process. There's a physical component to this. When you communicate with a person, and I'll digress, and I'll kind of try to put it in this context. So this past weekend, my brother and his family from Texas came up, and we had a big family reunion, and we were all together. And my relationship with my brother this weekend was so much different than when he's down in Texas and I'm here. We got our families, we got our careers, we got our stuff. He's still my brother.
Right.
It's just different. There's a connection when you see someone and you can look them in the eye. In trial work, it's just the same thing. There's body language. There's the relationships you have with judges.
Right.
In the last, think about it. It's literally been 2.5 years since we walked into the courthouse in Lake County, trial boxes in tow, starting that morning, March 16th of 2020, ready for trial, and it's been 2.5 years. And so the relationships are different because you don't see the judges, you don't see the other lawyers, far more contentious.
Right.
How many new judges do we have in every division? Lake County, Cook County, DuPage. Everywhere you go, there's new judges in the last 2.5 years, some of which you don't know. You've seen them on a TV screen. We had the Academy Gala, so the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers. We have an annual gala. A lot of lawyers, a lot of judges come to this event. And I couldn't find a single person who didn't say it's so great to actually be in person, reestablishing these relationships. So for me, the biggest drawback to Zoom is the lack of human interaction, which I value. Which is why we all work in the office together. We have since probably June or July of 2020.
Yeah,
it's how we feed off of each other, support each other. So I guess, like you said, the routine statuses.
Yeah.
There's some efficiency to that. It's fine. But even then, the old days, we would be in the courthouse. You built relationships with other lawyers. You'd see them every day. Hey, how you doing? Shake their hand, give them a hug, whatever it might be.
Right. Yeah.
And it made it a little easier when you had a case with them. Whereas now, I believe, and you tell me what you think, I think, I've been doing this 30 years. It is far more contentious, which makes the practice worse, which makes the cases worse. It's just everything about it is worse because there's no personal accountability. Everybody's just on a TV screen fighting it out, send an email, blast somebody. There's nobody that's got to stand in your face and say what they can say over an email or a Zoom.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I think one of the things that you touch, this whole issue of contest and everybody's, at each other's throats. Back in the old days, in which I experienced a little bit, was even with these simple, routine hearings, a motion for temporary support, or, something that ordinarily shouldn't have been filed because it's a mundane issue, 90% of the times, you're talking about this camaraderie. You see the other lawyer in person. You talk about it right before the hearing and say, what are we doing? And 9 times out of 10, when something's set for hearing like that, you resolve the case in the hallway.
But you know what? I'm going to interrupt you. Let's say it's 7 times out of 10 you resolve it with the opposing counsel. You know the person, you have a relationship. All right, let's do it. And it might be just because the other lawyer wasn't prepared, and now they're in court. They're scrambling. Let's get it done.
Right.
You know what else happens in those other 3 times out of 10 that you can't get it done when you're in court? You know what happens? Judge says, "Counsel, I want to see you in my chambers," and you go sit back with the judge, and now it's a human experience again. A judge, hey, how are the kids?
Right.
Hey, how did this go? How's this doing? Judge, how is this happening? And there's, again, a relational aspect of it. And then you get down to the brass tacks, and the judge says, guys, tell me, Jordan, tell me your position. James, tell me yours. All right, here's what we're going to do.
Right.
And it gets done.
It's problem solving. And the
Absolutely.
actual working together as professionals to solve problems has basically gone away.
Yeah.
And if, when I was saying you go in the hallway, you resolve it, some judges now are even like enacting orders where you can't show up for a hearing or on a dispute unless you've talked to each other on the phone first.
Which nobody does.
And so everybody kind of shows up, and it's like, the judge is like, well, why didn't you guys talk? And then now, because of, everybody's at each other's house, well, he didn't answer the phone. Well, he didn't answer the phone. Well, I sent an email. The judges don't want to deal with that.
No.
They just want to problem solve, which is exactly what has lacked in the last several years, I think, based on this fact that we're not together trying to resolve things. And to that end, you brought up a point, James, where everybody's an email bully now.
Yeah.
Where
tough guy.
Yeah, and it's way easier to be mean to somebody or to be positional or when you're sitting on your computer screen rather than when you're sitting across from somebody, and it just changed the whole thing. So what I think, and what we'll talk about as another podcast, is just the level of contest in these divorce proceedings with lawyers, with litigants, has just exploded from my perspective due to the COVID environment and how we've sort of progressed technologically.
And I think that, in an unforeseen way, has actually resulted in greater inefficiency. It's actually less efficient because all stuff does get kicked down the can gets kicked down the road. You don't problem solve, because the other thing is when you're in court, like Jordan says, lawyers start talking, maybe for the first time, just because we're busy or whatever. Maybe one particular client's not cooperative. You're there for a hearing. And so let's work it out. We can't. Judge says, come back. Can't work it out. Okay, you're stuck. You're there for a hearing. Mm-hmm. And somehow, some way, it's getting done that day. And that's not happening as much. So I don't have statistics to support this, but from our practice, I don't know that the volume of people getting divorced is any greater. We're always busy. But I do believe that the length of time it takes to get a case resolved is a lot longer now. Mm-hmm. So the system is getting clogged up. Things are getting backed up. It's more for the judges to deal with. It's harder for them to deal with on Zoom. And I just, so when you ask me pros and cons, other than being able to do something routine in my sweatpants, I put a jacket on, and it saves me travel time. I just honestly think it's way worse. And I think the trial we just had within the last couple of months, I think totally exemplified the difference of what because we've tried cases too, right? We've had trials where we've done them on Zoom, and we've done well with those. Mm-hmm. But the presence of being in court, and I think we've always had an advantage because we are trial lawyers. There's not every divorce lawyer is probably capable of a trial, but we've done so many trials, especially my 30 years. We have an advantage over people. You want to go to trial, you want to actually put your witness in the witness chair and let us examine them and us present evidence. We're gonna take advantage of that. Yeah. That's been missing.
Yeah, and I mean, just back to your comment, James. It's like I just want to talk about this contest for a minute. And so when I'm out socially, some people always ask me, how are divorces these days? And it's very in jest, but I say and when I'm thinking about that, the answer is very much aligned with what you said, James. Is that I don't know that the number of divorces are up, and I agree with you that the length that it takes time is longer generally, because the issues are so contested now. And it's like people are willing to go to the mattress on the lamp next to the bed than something more significant like where will a child attend school. Like everything is so contested that the length of time increases, and because of this whole dynamic with Zoom and you show up and there's no real accountability, that's really what I think is the most frustrating thing, I think, is the consequence to all of this.
Yep.
From Zoom.
And you know what? It's sort of interesting. I agree that the contention is just through the roof over everything. It's just even between judges and lawyers nowadays is worse. Let alone lawyers and lawyers, clients and clients. It's just bad. What I think is really interesting too is part of the problem has been judges enforcing their orders. Mm-hmm. And we had an experience where, again, it was in person within the last month or two. Our client's spouse didn't think he had to follow the judge's order. And it limped through the case, not quite a year, but probably close to 9-10 months, until we finally got a hearing date. And the judge allowed us to come into court on a contempt petition. And it was just, I had so much fun with it. So the guy himself happened to be a lawyer, which made it even more fun, thought he could represent himself. And we're in a courtroom, and by the way, these courtrooms now, it's like going into a hockey game. They got the big plexiglass thing. The judge is up on his, on the bench. He's encased in this glass deal with one of those things like you're at the 7-Eleven or something, or, yes, can I place my order? and so even the area where the litigant would sit, or the court reporter wants to zoom in, and we're trying to zoom in a court reporter. The litigant can't sit in the witness box because that's all closed in. So you're literally I'm standing this close to a guy I'm cross-examining.
Who can't hear you.
Well, right. Well, so it's just that in-person effect.
Right.
There's a physical component where it was just magnificent. And at the end of the day, the judge held this guy in contempt of court and basically said to me, he said, counsel, I'm going to give you the option. Gave me the choice to have the guy immediately go to jail or give him a little more time, basically 30 days to do it, and then if he doesn't do it in 30 days, goes to jail. So I wanted to move the case along. I just wanted him to comply with the order. So I said, fine, we'll give him the 30 days, let him off the hook a little bit. No sense in killing the golden goose. It's another lawyer. But the impact of that, when the judge stood up and he just, the presence of the judge being there, and he was giving it to this guy in person, had such an impact that the whole posture of the case changed. And I don't know that would have happened. I don't know that kind of hearing would have been that effective, because the judge is also watching, while that happens, the interpersonal dynamics. When you can get someone lying, when you can get them double talking, when you have an effective cross-examination, judge is sitting there reading the body language, the stammering, the stuff, and sees the guy's lying, that credibility comes across in a visceral way that sometimes in a Zoom you just can't pick up. So I think that being in court, being in person, allows the judges to be more firm in enforcing their orders, and when they're able to do that, cases then are able to progress.
Great point. Let me ask you a question about being a practitioner with the more in-person setting. Depositions. Depositions now, and for those that don't know what a deposition is, it's basically where James has the opportunity to just ask a bunch of questions to your significant other and make them feel really uncomfortable. So
it's a little more than that, but yeah.
Right. But it's a discovery tool where you can commit somebody to a story. There's a court reporter, and you have a whole transcript with questions and answers that are relevant to your case. So in that discovery tool, most often those used to occur in person, where you would physically sit across from somebody, your lawyer would be next to you, and the person asking questions would be physically asking questions with the court reporter there. How has that temperament and that environment with the depositions changed in your mind from Zoom to in-person? And is that similar to the thoughts that you had with in-person versus virtual court?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of main components to that, one of which is what we've been talking about, is the ability, part of why I take a deposition is not only information gathering, committing them to a story under oath. Mm-hmm. What you say in a deposition, you're under oath. If you at trial change your story, change your position, I'm going to impeach you, and the judge is going to see you're a liar. It's not going to go well for you. But I'm also reading the litigant. Or the deponent, right? Mm-hmm. It may not be necessary. It could be an ancillary witness. But I want to see how they react if I ask them curveball questions, if I press them, if I hit some hot buttons with them.
Right.
Because one of the things I'm very effective at, and you the same, and this is how we approach it, is you get a lot of these people that come in, they think they're very confident, and they know what you're going to ask them and stuff like that. It's when you know what you're doing in this arena, and you have experience and skill in doing that, you can disarm people to where they lose their focus. They oftentimes lose their cool. Mm-hmm. They can show their frustrations. And the judge, in that instance, gets to see the real person that they don't get to see throughout the litigation. They certainly don't get to see on Zoom. Mm-hmm. So in a deposition, it's, let me see how you respond to some of these questions. And, the reality is now, nobody's making anybody do anything in person. So a lot of the judges say, well, if someone's not comfortable, they don't have to. We have a situation right now. We have a case where we're going to try to depose somebody in October. They don't want to come in. And we're going to deal with that with the judge, and hopefully the judge orders him. There's no reason for him not to come into the office. And the other thing is, we've had cases in Zoom, during a deposition, you don't get to just sit there and I ask you a question and you say, hey, lawyer, tell me what to say.
Right.
You don't get to do that. I had a case once with one of our, an opponent of ours that we regularly are on the other side of. They literally paused the Zoom and shut their camera off and muted. Totally improper, unethical. It's almost like there's no rules.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say, is policing the behaviors around these depositions has really been difficult. I just had a deposition the other day, and I took it on Zoom, and during the middle of my questioning of this guy, he was like typing on his computer. And so some may ask, what's the problem with that? Why can't you take notes? Well, what else what's on his computer screen? What's he writing? Is he reading off something? Did he take notes in advance? Was he prepared in some way where he's reading answers?
Emailing his lawyer.
Or he's texting or emailing his lawyer. I mean, that's really, and it's really taken sort of, again, this whole concept of accountability is just like gone. And it's different to sit across from somebody where somebody can see exactly what you're doing, exactly what you're thinking, exactly where your eyes are going, exactly what you're reading, than basically not being a part of the proceeding and just sitting at your desk like any other day, just kind of answering questions nonchalantly. So that's been really frustrating for me, and I agree that, sometimes, I'm a Zoom fan, generally. I do think that there's a lot of pitfalls to it, like for all the reasons that we talked about. Sometimes I do think it's easier. I took this on Zoom, and sometimes it's fine, other times it's not. This was one that, in hindsight, moving forward, has changed my perspective to say, I think we need to do depositions in person moving forward for all the reasons we just talked about.
Yeah. And I, to be honest, I think in many respects, the issue of in-person versus Zoom is a combination of probably personalities and maybe generational as well. Like I said, 30 years ago, to think someone would be doing something on a computer screen, us doing a podcast on a computer, it was like watching the Jetsons or something like that. Yeah, right. I could barely work a computer, right? Our cell phones weren't, now everything is in here, all of our data, all this. So technology has allowed some of this, which certainly during the middle of a pandemic, if we needed to be shut down the way we were, we're not questioning that, but we were stuck. So it at least allowed us to function, but it really, I think, has removed the human element, which is, this is family law. We're dealing with families. During the pandemic, I represented people I never met.
Yeah.
It was just ridiculous. And you're talking about their children's welfare. You're talking about abusive situations. You're talking about, significant economic that are going to impact people's entire lives. And let's just jump on a Zoom at 4:00, and it was all of the interpersonal aspects of our business with our clients, with judges, with other lawyers. was obliterated. And I see people trying to bring that back, but I see it like I see the world these days. I've never seen the world so divided. And this is just another aspect. You've got people hardcore. I'm never going into an office. We've got competitor firms that are saying we're going remote. I don't know how you could work, mentor young lawyers, exchange ideas when you're not working together, but some people are very much aligned with that. We're probably more on the other side, where we like to interact with each other, with judges, with other lawyers, you know, and that's a big part of it. And I think I'll close with my complaining about the virtual world is, for 27, 28 years of my career, every morning you get up and you went to court. And whether the issue you had that day was big or small, whether you had one matter up or 8, and you're running from courtroom to courtroom, there was an energy to that. There was a camaraderie to that. You would see people. I remember there was a woman I tried a case with early in my career, and we went at it and we duked it out, but it never got personal. And we got to know each other. And years would go by and I never had a case with her, but I would see her in the courtroom or in the halls of the courtroom, and it was just like a fun part of the day. Give her a hug and a kiss. Great to see you. She'd ask about the kids and the family and so forth. And we'd go on about our day. But we had built a relationship, and then later in our careers, we'd get a case together, and we've dispensed with all of the posturing and positional stuff, and we understood we have a job to do. I respected her. She had earned my respect, and I hope that I think I had done the same with her. I don't know how you do that. I mean, we have young people in our office. We just had 3 or 4 people in our office just passed the bar just this week. So, you know, talented young lawyers in the making. How do you train them on a phone call, on a Zoom, without being in court? It's just, I can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really difficult. I mean, we have very intelligent, like, with it associates that, you know, their whole career has been virtual.
Yeah.
And so the only way they learn is now through this hybrid program where, you know, to me, a big part of my learning experience was schlepping over to court with a huge box and 2 red welds, and you're running around and you're digging through your stuff, and you just know what to do to prepare for things. And now I think we're really reliant on our document management systems, and we just kind of show up to court, and there's, you know, I mean, you prepare in advance just like you always do, but if the judge asks for, hey, do you have a copy of the order? Then, you know, you type it on your thing, you pull it up, and then you share screen it instead of just pulling it out of your thing, ready to go, give it to the judge.
But how many, even that, I rely heavily. Jordan's amazing with the technology. Me, not so much. My team is amazing. So I don't have to think about those things. But I've been in trials where literally the opposing counsel can't figure out how to pull up their own damn exhibits.
Right.
And the judge will turn to us, Mr. Quigley, you know, can your office pull up that order?
Right.
Sure, Judge. Right. We're doing the job for the other. And they look like complete idiots.
Right.
And so that to me is a thing too, where it's like a lot of offices, you know, I can't tell you the amount of money we spent on document management and software programs and technology stuff within our offices. We're sitting in a boardroom right now and, you know, able to do this with TVs on the screen and so forth on the wall. So, you know, that's been a problem too. How about court reporters? We've been mid-trial, just asked the greatest question, nailed it, and then we realize, oh, the court reporter's frozen, right? You know, completely missed the whole thing. You can't go back and say, you know, can you read back the last question? I don't remember what it was. It was in the moment. We nailed it, and they're frozen.
Yep.
So, you know, it is, it sort of is what it is. And we, like I said, we're heading into the last quarter of 2022. It's just crazy to even think about that. And we're optimistic, and we'll hopefully heading into 2023 that the world will stay healthy, that we've learned good health habits from all the stuff that's happened, that we can get back into somewhat of, if nothing else, you know, if we're going to do some things that are sort of routine and mundane, okay, we can do those on Zoom. But let's not forget about the relationships.
I agree.
And how important that is to be able to, like you said, problem solve. That's what a divorce is. It's a problem for families, many of which didn't ask for it, didn't want it, that we as lawyers in helping those people are really just trying to problem solve. What are the economic resolutions? How do we protect children? And how do we do this that you don't spend your children's college fund paying us to fight over, like you said, the toaster or the wall hanging or these things that seem to be prevalent in our practice these days.
Yeah.
So, again, this is, we're back and excited to have the podcast up and going, and we are always open to consult with anyone over questions you have. If you're thinking about a divorce, if you're in the middle of a divorce, if you have just come out of a divorce and you're still having problems or there's some enforcement issues, you can always reach out to us. Our website is www.beermannlaw.com, and always remember Beermann is relatively easy to remember, but the spelling is with two N's on Beermann. And you can always reach out. My direct extension is 312-621-1225. And Jordan, what's your direct extension?
312-262-2567.
Great. So anything we can do to help, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And please continue to be on the lookout for additional podcast episodes. We are going to continue to try to give you that behind-the-scenes look with hopes that this really going into the new year's can be of help to you. So enjoy the remainder of the year, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Take care.